Hello and welcome back to Dream Room. If your summer pots are starting to look tired, don't empty them yet. September can be one of the best months to refresh a patio, porch, balcony, or small backyard with perennials that keep blooming deep into fall. And you do not need a large garden. Maybe you have a narrow 6 by 8 foot patio, a rented deck where you cannot dig, a sunny balcony outside your bedroom, or simply one empty corner beside the chair where you drink your morning coffee. A single well-planned container can completely change how that space feels. September gives us an interesting advantage. The air is beginning to cool, but the potting mix is still warm enough for roots to establish quickly. That means the right perennial can settle in now, flower through September and October, and in many climates return again next year. But there is one problem. Garden centers are full of beautiful plants this time of year, and not all of them belong in containers. Some need water every day. Some collapse on a hot concrete patio. Others look spectacular for 2 weeks and disappear after the first cold night. So today, I'm going to show you 8 perennial plants that actually earn their space in a fall container. Some are perfect if lifting heavy watering cans is becoming less comfortable. Some tolerate a missed watering when you are busy or away for the weekend. One can bring hummingbirds almost close enough to watch from your chair. Another changes color as autumn nights become cooler. And I'll show you something just as important: how to make these pots look intentional rather than like random plants collected from a clearance bench. We'll use simple containers, fresh potting mix, natural textures like terracotta, weathered wood and stone, and combinations that work even if you have limited storage, limited gardening space, or only basic tools. You certainly do not need to redesign the whole yard. Start with one pot in the place you see every day. Beside the front door, outside your kitchen window, near your home office, or next to your favorite outdoor chair. And our first plant is probably the easiest place to begin. It survives heat, forgives occasional neglect, changes color through fall, and can still look beautiful after the flowers have dried. Before we get to it, if you enjoy practical decorating and small space garden ideas that are beautiful, affordable, and genuinely manageable, subscribe to Dream Room. Now, let's start with the perennial I would trust in almost any sunny September container. 1. Sedum, the easiest fall container for almost anyone. If you want one perennial that gives you color without demanding constant attention, start with Sedum. For a sunny patio, balcony, front step, or narrow backyard, upright varieties such as Autumn Joy and Autumn Fire are difficult to beat. They stay neat, handle heat well, and continue changing long after many summer flowers have faded. That changing color is part of the appeal. In late summer, the flower heads may begin pale green. By September, they soften into dusty pink. As October arrives, those same clusters deepen toward rose, rust, and copper. Even after flowering ends, I would not cut them off. The dry brown seed heads hold their shape through frost and can look surprisingly beautiful beside weathered wood, terracotta, stone, or a simple garden bench. In other words, this plant keeps decorating the space even when it is technically finished blooming. Sedum is also a very practical choice if watering every day is difficult. Its thick, succulent leaves store moisture, so missing one watering is usually far less serious than it would be for a hydrangea or mum. That makes it useful for older gardeners, busy homeowners, or anyone who wants a container near the driveway, home office window, or back door without adding another demanding chore. For one upright plant, a container around 12 to 14 inches wide is usually enough for compact varieties. Use a light, fast-draining potting mix. If your mix stays wet for a long time, blend in roughly 1/3 perlite, pumice, or coarse grit. And here is the mistake I see most often: treating sedum too generously. Too much compost, too much fertilizer, and too much shade can produce tall, soft stems that flop open by early fall. Sedum actually looks better when life is slightly leaner. Give it sun, let the upper mix dry between waterings. Feed very lightly, if at all. For a more finished look, add a creeping sedum such as Angelina or Dragon's Blood. Around the rim, the upright plant gives you height, while the trailing stems soften the edge of the pot. Best of all, both plants enjoy nearly the same dry conditions. That is an important container design lesson we will use throughout this video. Beautiful combinations are easier when every plant in the pot wants the same kind of care. And if Sedum is the dependable choice for people who want less work, our next perennial is almost the opposite in personality. It turns a quiet September container into a burst of purple, blue, and pink, and it can bring late-season pollinators right to your window. 2. Asters, the plant that makes September feel like a second spring. If Sedum is the dependable choice for a dry, sunny container, Asters are the plant to choose when you want real flower color to return in September. By late summer, many annuals are slowing down. Petunias look tired. Geraniums may be stretched and uneven. Some containers have plenty of green leaves but almost no flowers left. Then asters begin. Their small daisy-like blooms appear in shades of purple, lavender, blue, pink, and white, often covering the plant just as the rest of the garden starts becoming quieter. For a small patio, balcony, front porch, or narrow backyard, compact asters are especially useful because they create a lot of color without taking up much floor space. But there is one buying rule I want you to remember. Choose the plant with the most unopened buds, not the one with the most open flowers. A fully blooming aster may look irresistible at the garden center, but part of its display has already happened. A healthy plant covered in tight buds can give you several more weeks of color at home, often continuing through September and into October until a hard frost finally ends the show. For containers, choose compact varieties rather than tall forms that can become loose and top-heavy. A pot around 12 to 14 inches wide works well for a single compact plant, while a larger container gives the roots more protection from drying out. Unlike sedum, asters prefer their potting mix to stay reasonably even in moisture. Do not leave them sitting in water, but do not allow the entire root ball to become bone dry either. Check the soil regularly, especially if the container is sitting on a warm deck or paved patio. Airflow matters too. Asters can develop powdery mildew when leaves remain crowded and damp. Give the pot a little breathing room, and when you water, aim near the base of the plant instead of soaking the foliage every evening. Now think about placement. Instead of hiding this container at the far end of the yard, put it somewhere you can enjoy from inside the house. Place one beside the patio door, outside the kitchen window, or where you can see it from your favorite chair. As September evenings become cooler and you spend more time indoors, that bright patch of purple can still feel like part of the room. And you may notice visitors. Late-season bees and other pollinators often depend on asters when fewer flowers remain available. So this is not simply another decorative pot. It can become a small autumn feeding station right outside your window. Next, we will move away from flowers for a moment, because one of the most useful container plants on this list can create fall color without depending on blooms at all. 3. Hardy garden mums, the fall classic most people buy too late. After asters, the next plant is one almost everyone recognizes the moment September arrives. Hardy garden mums. They appear everywhere in fall. Garden centers stack them by the entrance. Supermarkets line them up beside pumpkins. Porches suddenly fill with yellow, bronze, red, pink, and white flowers. But the biggest mistake is not choosing the wrong color. It is buying the wrong type, or buying it too late. Many mums sold mainly for seasonal decoration are florist mums. They are grown to produce a dense dome of flowers for a short display, but they are not always the best choice if you want a perennial that has a real chance of returning next year. For containers, look specifically for hardy garden mums, suited to your climate. And just as with asters, do not automatically choose the plant with the most open flowers. Look for one covered with tight buds. A fully blooming mum may look better on the store shelf today, but a plant with unopened buds gives you more of the flowering period at home. In September, that can mean several additional weeks of color before frost. Timing matters too. Planting a hardy mum in September gives its roots more time to settle into the container than waiting until late October, when cold weather may arrive before the plant becomes established. When you shop, inspect the entire plant. Do not look only at the flowers. Check the leaves near the base. They should look healthy rather than yellow or badly damaged. Look at the stems. Avoid plants that appear weak, broken, or severely wilted. Also check whether the root ball has dried out completely. Once you bring the mum home, keep the potting mix consistently moist. A severe wilt can cause developing buds to drop, reducing the display you bought the plant for. At this point in the season, do not pinch the stems back. Pinching is an earlier season job used to encourage branching. By September, the flower buds are already developing, and cutting the tips now can remove the very blooms you are waiting for. For decorating, you do not need 3 identical mums lined up in matching plastic pots. A more natural arrangement is to place one hardy mum in a broad container with a dwarf ornamental grass. The mum provides the strong fall color. The grass adds height, movement, and texture. And when the mum eventually finishes flowering, the grass can continue carrying the container visually into late fall. That is the difference between simply buying fall flowers and actually designing a container that lasts. Next, we are moving to a much larger statement plant, one that can replace several smaller pots and change color as the autumn nights become cooler. 4. Panicle Hydrangea, the one pot that can replace an entire flower display. If your patio is small and you do not want to manage 5 or 6 separate containers, a panicle hydrangea can become the entire focal point by itself. This is the kind of plant I would use beside a front door, near a favorite outdoor chair, or at the end of a narrow patio where you want one strong visual feature without making the space feel crowded. The important detail is the type. For containers, focus on panicle hydrangeas. Not just any hydrangea you happen to see in bloom. Compact varieties such as Little Lime and Bobo are especially useful because they give you the full hydrangea effect without becoming too large for a small porch, balcony, or backyard corner. What makes them so valuable in fall is that the flowers do not simply appear and disappear. They change. A bloom that starts creamy white or lime can gradually develop blush tones as nights become cooler. Then those colors deepen into dusty pink and eventually an antique rose. So one flower head can give you several different looks between late summer and autumn. That makes panicle hydrangea especially effective for people who enjoy decorating their outdoor space but do not want to keep replacing plants every few weeks. Give it a generously sized container. Hydrangeas need more soil volume and more consistent moisture than sedum, Russian sage, or many other drought-tolerant perennials. A larger pot helps the roots stay cooler and gives you a bigger moisture reserve between waterings. And here is an important practical detail if lifting heavy containers is becoming uncomfortable. Put the empty pot on a wheeled plant caddy before you fill it. Once a large container is packed with damp potting mix and a mature hydrangea, it can become surprisingly heavy. Setting it on wheels first means you can move it away from harsh weather, adjust its position, or clean underneath it without trying to lift the entire thing. Keep the soil consistently moist, especially during warm September afternoons. Do not push the plant with heavy fertilizer this late in the season. The goal now is steady flowering and root establishment, not a rush of soft new growth. And when the blooms begin to fade, Do not feel that you must remove them immediately. Those dried flower heads can continue adding soft, natural texture into late fall and early winter. If you like spaces that feel calm rather than cluttered, this is one of the best examples of using one larger plant instead of many smaller decorations. Next, we are going back to something simpler and brighter, a perennial that brings strong golden color to sunny containers and asks for very little in return. 5. Black-eyed Susan, sunshine that keeps going into fall. If you want a perennial that brings strong color without demanding complicated care, Black-eyed Susan is one of the safest choices for a sunny container. Its golden yellow petals and dark centers immediately brighten a patio, front step, balcony, or small backyard corner, especially in September when many summer flowers are beginning to fade. The key is choosing the right type. Look for Perennial Rudbeckia. Rather than assuming every plant sold as Black-eyed Susan will return year after year. Some types are shorter-lived, while reliable perennial forms are much better suited to a container you want to keep beyond one season. After planting, give the roots consistent moisture for the first few weeks. A newly transplanted Rudbeckia still needs time to settle in, but once established, it handles heat and short dry periods much better than many other daisy-like flowers. That makes it useful if you have a sunny patio but do not want another plant that immediately collapses when watering is a little late. It also fits beautifully into a relaxed, natural style of decorating. Think about a simple clay pot beside an old wooden bench, or a container placed near reclaimed timber, woven baskets, natural stone, or weathered garden furniture. Those warm yellow flowers look especially inviting against earthy materials. And this is one plant where doing less can actually make the container more interesting. When the flowers begin to fade, you do not need to remove every dark seed head. Leave some standing. The black centers create texture after the petals disappear, and birds such as goldfinches may visit them later in the season for seeds. That means the container continues to have a purpose even after peak flowering has passed. For gardeners who prefer a tidy space, this can take a little adjustment. We are often taught that everything brown should be cut away immediately. But in a fall garden, a few mature seed heads can make a container feel more natural and seasonal rather than neglected. So if you have a sunny corner beside the porch, a small deck, or a spot near the home office window that needs one last burst of warmth, Rudbeckia is an easy plant to trust. It gives you bold color, tolerates some neglect after establishment, works beautifully with natural materials, and asks very little in return. Next, we move to a very different look. If your patio becomes hot enough in September that most containers struggle, the next perennial actually prefers those difficult conditions, and its silver foliage can make the whole space feel visually cooler. 6. Russian Sage, the answer for a hot, dry patio. If your patio feels more like an oven than a garden in September, Russian Sage may be exactly the plant you need. This is especially useful for south-facing decks, concrete patios, exposed balconies, and sunny corners where ordinary containers seem to dry out only a few hours after watering. Russian Sage handles those conditions surprisingly well. For containers, choose compact varieties. Rather than the tall forms that can reach 4 or 5 feet and overwhelm a small space, smaller selections stay more balanced in pots and are easier to place beside a chair, along a narrow walkway, or near a sunny wall. The combination of silvery foliage and lavender blue flowers gives Russian Sage a very different look from mums, Rudbeckia, or hydrangeas. It feels lighter. The stems move gently in the breeze. The flowers create an airy haze of color, and the silver leaves can visually soften a patio surrounded by concrete, stone, or hard surfaces. That is one reason I like using it with simple materials. A pale gray container, natural stone, weathered wood, or muted outdoor furniture can make the whole corner feel calmer and cooler, even before the temperature actually changes. Russian Sage wants full sun, and excellent drainage. Do not make the common mistake of trying to help it with rich compost, constant watering, and heavy fertilizer. Too much feeding produces soft stems that can flop open. Soil that stays wet creates an even bigger problem. Use a free-draining potting mix, and if necessary, add perlite or coarse grit so excess water moves out quickly. Once the roots are established, this is one of the better choices for gardeners who cannot water every container every day. That can make a real difference if carrying a watering can has become uncomfortable, if your hose does not reach the far end of the patio easily, or if you simply want fewer gardening chores. There is another useful bonus. The aromatic foliage is generally less appealing to deer and rabbits, which can make Russian sage a practical choice for patios near open gardens. And when fall arrives, resist the urge to cut the plant down immediately. Russian sage develops a woody framework, so leave those stems in place through winter and wait until spring before doing the main pruning. In the right sunny spot, this is a perennial that rewards restraint. Less water, less fertilizer, less fuss. Next, we will use the same hot sunny conditions for a plant that offers something Russian sage cannot. A steady stream of hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies right beside your chair. 7. Agastache. Put a hummingbird garden in one container. If you want your small outdoor space to feel more alive, not just more decorated, Agastache is one of the best perennials to add in September. Also sold as hummingbird mint or hyssop, Agastache produces upright flower spikes that keep blooming for a long period and attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. That makes it especially useful if you have a balcony, small patio, narrow deck, or tiny backyard where there is no room for a full pollinator garden. You can create that experience in a single container. For small spaces, choose a compact variety that suits your local climate. Depending on the selection, the flowers may be blue, violet, coral, or orange. Place the pot where you can actually enjoy the activity. A spot beside your favorite outdoor chair works well. So does a sunny position near a patio door or window where you can watch hummingbirds and butterflies without walking far into the garden. Agastache performs best in full sun and fast-draining soil. Like Russian sage, it does not want a rich, constantly wet container. Use a good potting mix with excellent drainage, and avoid keeping the root zone soggy as temperatures begin to cool in autumn. Moderate watering is enough once the plant becomes established. This is another reason Agastache works well for gardeners who prefer a simpler routine or who do not want to carry heavy watering cans around the patio every day. But the plant offers more than flowers. Its foliage has a noticeable, minty or licorice-like fragrance when brushed or touched. For that reason, consider placing the pot beside a walkway, near a chair, or somewhere your hand may naturally pass over the leaves. A container garden does not have to be something you only look at. It can also give you fragrance, movement, and the sound of pollinators moving from flower to flower. When combining Agastache with other plants, keep its dry-growing preference in mind. Pair it with other drought-tolerant perennials. Not thirsty plants that need constantly moist soil. Plants sharing one container should be comfortable with the same watering routine. This simple rule makes container gardening much easier. Agastache is especially effective when you want to turn a small sunny space into something that feels connected to nature without adding more maintenance. One pot can bring flowers, fragrance, butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds almost within arm's reach. And for our final perennial, we are going to focus less on flowers and more on structure. Because if your containers have plenty of color but still look unfinished, dwarf ornamental grass may be the missing piece. 8. Dwarf ornamental grasses, the secret to making containers look professionally designed. If your fall containers have plenty of flowers but still seem to look unfinished, the missing element may not be another bloom. It may be ornamental grass. Flowers give you color, but grasses give you structure, movement, and height. That is what often makes a container look designed rather than simply filled. For pots, choose compact varieties that stay proportional to a patio, balcony, porch, or small backyard. Dwarf fountain grasses can produce soft plumes in late summer and fall, while compact little bluestem varieties can shift from green into copper, bronze, or burgundy as temperatures cool. That seasonal change is one of their greatest strengths. Even after nearby flowers begin to fade, the grass continues to contribute shape and texture, and when low September or October sunlight passes through the seed heads, those plumes can become one of the most attractive features on the entire patio. There is a very simple design formula worth remembering. Tall structure, rounded flowers, and something trailing. For example, place a dwarf ornamental grass toward the back or center of a large container. Add a compact aster or hardy mum in front of it for strong fall color. Then allow a tiny creeping sedum to spill gently over the rim. 3 different shapes, 3 different layers. The grass rises above the arrangement. The flowers create a full middle section. The trailing sedum softens the hard edge of the pot. That simple combination can make a container beside your front door, outdoor chair, or patio table look much more intentional without requiring complicated design skills. There is one important detail when you shop. Read the plant label carefully. Some ornamental grasses sold in autumn displays are tender in colder climates and may behave as annuals rather than returning the following year. If your goal is a true perennial container, choose a variety that is hardy for your area. Once established, many ornamental grasses also require relatively little attention. And when winter approaches, do not rush to cut the stems down. Leave the dried plumes standing. They continue moving in the wind, catch frost beautifully, and provide structure when most flowering containers have disappeared. The main cleanup can wait until early spring. So if your collection of pots feels colorful but disconnected, adding one compact grass may be enough to bring everything together. Now that we have all 8 perennials, the next step is just as important. How you plant them in September can decide whether they thrive or struggle before winter arrives. Conclusion: 8 perennials, 1 beautiful fall container garden. September does not mean your patio, balcony, porch, or small backyard has to start looking empty. In many cases, it is actually the perfect moment to simplify. Instead of replacing tired summer flowers with another temporary display, choose a perennial that can give you color now and continue adding value after fall. If you want the easiest option, start with Sedum. For strong September flowers, choose Asters or hardy garden mums. If you want one large focal point beside the front door or your favorite chair, A. Compact Panicle Hydrangea can replace several smaller pots. For warm golden color, Black-Eyed Susan is hard to beat. If your patio is hot and dry, Russian Sage gives you silver foliage and long-lasting flowers with less watering. For butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds, try Agastache. Sobo. And if your containers have color but still feel unfinished, add a Dwarf Ornamental Grass. For height, movement, and structure. Most importantly, design around the space you actually have. You may have only a 6 by 8 foot patio, a rented balcony, a narrow side yard, or one sunny corner outside your home office. That is enough. You do not need 10 new pots. Start with 1 container. Put it somewhere you see every day. Use a pot large enough for the roots, good drainage, fresh potting mix, and plants that share the same sunlight and watering needs. Small changes like these can make an outdoor space feel calmer, warmer, and much more intentional. Now I would love to hear from you. Which of these 8 perennials would you plant this September, And where would you place the container? Your porch, balcony, patio, or backyard? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoy practical ideas for decorating small spaces, arranging your home, and creating simple, beautiful gardens with materials that are easy to find and easy to use, subscribe to Dream Room and follow the channel for more ideas like these. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.